And here we are. Thanks for joining, everyone. It's Friday and it's 8 a.m. and I'm in England. I've got birds singing outside, chirping. Normally I'm obviously in Sydney, but this time I'm in the UK, and I just thought for a change, rather than having the normal podcast with an exec, I wanted to bring the team on, because we've got some amazing people in our team. I've got a new co-founder, as you probably don't know. So Georgia Wembley is with us now, and is doing some amazing stuff. And we also have a new head of partnerships, Ryan, who has basically got a lived experience of working with the SDR model. And I wanted to bring him on, Georgia, on for a conversation around this, because I think, and we've been seeing this a lot, things need to change. And I think for the first time in a long time, lots of companies and executives have been challenging the SDR model. And I think it's smart. I think it's smart for the first time. The predictable revenue model has challenged some companies who started doing it 12 to 15 years ago. I think for those of you that have followed us and have been a part of the Meet Magic, you'll know that I'm always talking about getting the best use out of marketing dollars and sales spend. And I think the SDR model since 2017 has been around going strong. And I think if you look at the data back from 2017, I think it's clear that function does not perform when scrutinized against revenue. And I think, but back then we were, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we were in this cycle of growth at all costs. It was an area where literally nobody cared. They just spent money. And I think execs and investors didn't care if their SDR team had a CAC payback of 4 years. It was, I think many execs that I interacted with didn't even calculate metrics like this, which is kind of nuts when you think about the amount of money that's being spent. They just chalked it up. This is how we do B2B sales, and they accepted it. And I think similar to how B2B companies build trade show booths every year, they really get appropriate ROI from those investments, but they still, this is the nuts part of this, they still go every year because they have to be there. Crazy stuff. I mean, if it was all about getting your brand awareness, well, you could spend that $20,000 and get 50,000 people across your brand online. You don't need to get 100 people turning up to a booth. So I think we're in an era now of profitable, efficient growth, and companies need to rethink their entire go-to-market strategy, the operating model, but more importantly, the cost structures. And I think there's a lot of pressure that's pushing down, that's going to force these companies to really start looking and scrutinizing now at all the things that they do in the go-to-market, because they've accepted those best practices for 10 years, and they're not best practice anymore. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Georgia and Hi. Ryan.
Hello.
Good evening. How are you?
Happy Friday.
Well, thanks, Carl. Likewise.
So for everyone that's watching around the world, I'm in the UK, and that's why it looks dark in Sydney, because it's 5. What is it? 4 o'clock? 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
That's normally the time I'll do a podcast actually in Sydney actually. But so Ryan, maybe we should just introduce ourselves, because you've joined us a while ago, and what most people probably won't know is that you worked with one of our clients, Conga, who's been an amazing supporter. So massive shout out to Kylie, wherever you are. Get well soon. So give us a bit of your background, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Carl. Like you said, I've come from the vendor side, where I had 3, I guess, key roles. I've had a bit of a background all across a software business. So I started in customer success, and then I moved into a solutions engineer role. So I was a bit of a technical expert there for Conga. And then I moved into an enterprise business account manager, where I was able to look after some of Conga's larger accounts. So I've got a bit of a well-rounded experience when it comes to, I guess, the sales side, the technical side, but also, I guess, managing and looking after our existing client base on the customer success side all the way through to renewals. So yeah, it's a very interesting background, but yeah, I kind of use it to my strengths. So yeah, there's a bit of a background.
I must say, when you joined us, you filled a gap that I couldn't fill because you spoke really clearly about what we do better than I did, which is very, very cool. But you brought this level of clarity about the value proposition that comes from a Meet Magic meeting because you've actually experienced them on your side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where Meet Magic and, us spreading the word about what Meet Magic actually does is so beneficial. So yeah. I was able to utilize Meet Magic in my role as an enterprise seller to be a lot more strategic in how I operated. Typically when we look at sales, and I mean, we're going to get into this shortly, but the way that we operate, there's only so much time in the day, so much time in the week. And I think on average, a seller only spends 33% of their week actually selling. So this was a way that I could jump onto the Meet Magic platform, look at my key target account list and be able to just request meetings. So typically when we look at that traditional, I guess, outreach or traditional motion of, reaching out to your target account list, it's very manual. Everyone else is doing it. These execs are highly targeted. So this was a creative way or an in that I was able to do that.
Yeah, right. We'll come back to that SDR stuff in a minute because it's really powerful. I honestly think times are really, really changing. I know Raz Kotler up in Singapore is watching this. I know he knows this is a really important topic. Anyway, Georgia, welcome to my team.
Thank you. It's definitely been a magic carpet ride the last few weeks.
Hasn't it just?
It's gone so quickly. I think it's already been about 2 months.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of wild. And I always say you always know when you've made the right choice because things flow. And when they flow, they flow. But there's been a different level of flow when you've joined. It's almost like we've had these moments of serendipity like every 5 minutes. There's someone. What's going on there? I don't know. But tell us a bit about your background because you've been an entrepreneur. You've done everything already, and you're only like 24.
Thank you. Yeah, so no, it's actually so interesting. I mean, the background between how we met, I obviously was in the startup space. I previously had a delivery app in Australia that had the first buy now, pay later cryptocurrency option. And then, during my journey with the startup world, came across you at the Women in Tech Fest. And then it was really a full circle moment when we bumped into each other at the Salesforce event, which is incredible. So right now, obviously, I'm very within the Salesforce ecosystem, working at Collabora Digital and Presido, working with our partners, Salesforce, and then obviously with our customers as well over across the Asia Pacific region. So very much across what's happening in the market in terms of struggles from the sales side, but then also from the partner side as well. So yeah, very timely conversation in terms of where marketing budget is going, and then what's happening in terms of the sales teams and their connections and relationships they're having with executives.
Yeah, you know what? It's so perfect timing. It's almost like it's almost like the universe is saying to me, "Don't worry, Carl, I've got your back." I think if you write a square, if you get a piece of paper and write down the key things that you want in a co-founder, you would want someone that's been there, done that, and tried it, and had a couple of failures behind them because they understand it, they get the logic, they get the things around hustle, and I mean that hustle culture is you never switch off, you're just always on. It's not like you don't. The weekends are just another day. It's not, and I to try and find someone to come on board and take that role is kind of really hard because you almost feel guilty that they're going to have to bust their ass to get stuff done. And then you want someone that understands sales and understands the background and how to communicate and have networks and have contacts. And you've ticked every single one of those boxes. So I think you are the proverbial unicorn because you just can't find people like this that want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym and then work their ass off until 9 o'clock and then pass out. That's what we do. So
Every day.
I'm very proud to have you on board and supporting me. And I can't tell you, if everyone could see what impact you've made already, they go, wow. I mean, this is, and we met at a Women in Tech conference, and you are a woman in tech, and this is right up your alley, so to speak, metaphorically. Probably shouldn't say that. No, this is the perfect position for you.
It really is. No, I've been really enjoying the journey, and I think it's so exciting to see what we're doing with Meet Magic now. I feel like it's really evolved, and this impact card launch that we're having on the 11th of June is just going to be incredible, obviously at the Salesforce Tower. So yeah, it's very exciting.
And let's just paint that picture a little bit, because what you've done is you've got us access to the most premium spot in the city, not just in the city. It is the highest office building in New South Wales,
Yes.
and we've got the whole day, including during Vivid, to be able to launch our product at the top. And so anyone that comes along is going to get a 360-degree view of Vivid like never before.
And if you've been in the last few years and seen the crowds, I'm very happy to be seeing it from the Salesforce Tower.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not getting me going down there. It's just, yeah, that's like, I'm actually in the countryside at the moment, and there's lots of sheep down here, and that is like herding sheep down there. So Ryan, let's get into this SDR stuff, because I often say that SDRs are they're a vital source inside a company. They absolutely should not. And we're not saying discount them all at all. We're not saying stop using SDRs or any of that, because outbound is really critical. But let's go back to what's happened over the past few years with all this money that was around. And there was let's start off talking about the ratios, because it used to be that you'd have one SDR to one AE or one salesperson. And that's how it was when all the money was around, right?
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I think, when we start to look back at the COVID time period, software was booming. I mean, we could all work 24/7, right, across globally, across the business. So, SDRs were brought in to get that engine room really going. And I guess that was really driven out of the US, where I guess cold calling and cold emails is much more receptible in the US market. Not saying that it doesn't work here, it definitely does. But I think that was the real engine room here of sparking that with the SDR function. But I guess the traditional means of the SDR, when we start to look at it and we go back a decade or two, it used to be just volume based, right? Get on the phone, start calling, start talking about your pitch. And now we're starting to kind of move towards the more personalization, creative measures of trying to get in front of our key contact account list. So, I mean, these guys grind, they really do. And I've got to give it to these people. They come out of uni, they're hungry, they've got to be tenacious, they've got to be, told rude words, left, right, and center they're hung up on. So it really gives you resilience, and it's a great start in your career. But I think as teams are starting, or especially in software and tech, starting to be as lean as possible when they come into, they go to market and how they operate as a sales team, it's getting harder for them, right? The ratios are starting to push out. So instead of being that one-to-one with their AE, have that, that guide or that mentor to kind of navigate the sales landscape with, it's being spread out across maybe even up to 4 AEs, which it was at my last company. So it's being really spread. And you've got to be really in check with those AEs too. They've all got different ways that they strategize. They operate different ways as well. So, it's such a pivotal position. It really is. And it's, many of our leaders in software and tech started as an SDR, right? So we've got to take that into consideration. But it's definitely changing. I think especially in the Australian market, it's really hard to cut through, and it's really hard to have these types of conversations that, really break through and move the needle. So, we're trying to navigate as we go. And, a lot of our companies that we work with are US based, and they're telling us, this is the way that you should operate. This is the way that, SDRs should function, but does that really work in region? So it's something that we always think about as teams here. We're going to take what you're saying on board, but we need to really Australianize it. Australians are very typical around how we have conversations and our relationships. So it's something that we really need to take on board.
Do you mean typical, as in they'll tell you to piss off if they don't if you can't call them?
Exactly right. There's a certain way to do it, and I think messaging is a really key part of that. There's always templates that are passed down from the US or even from Europe. This is what's working here. You guys should use it. That doesn't work. So it needs to be altered.
What is going on there, Ryan? Because that for me is a big thing, right? Because you've got a lot of American culture that's being shoved down your throat here, but it's not working. It's not translating. Why is that? What's different about America versus Australia?
I guess it's a larger population. They're more susceptible to having these conversations. I think too. They're much more open to cold calls. You really see that in the data, and not saying, the SDRs, are finding it easy over there. They're definitely not. No one really likes to have a cold call, do they? So yeah, I think it's just they're more susceptible to cut through. I think they're more inclined to just take those calls and have those conversations. And maybe it's harder. It's easier to get into certain accounts.
Georgia, what's it like with you? And I mean, Presido and you guys are obviously you're in sales. You're either in sales or you're not. You're either in sales or you're buying. That's it. There's no in between. There's no grey area.
Sales role.
Exactly. I mean, what's it like in your organizations? Are you seeing any challenges out there with the SDR model?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting because when you look at traditional sales, I mean, if you're going to have a valuable conversation, you're going to have your most experienced salesperson in the room having that conversation. So I think it's almost looking at how you approach these accounts strategically and where you see value to kind of place your bets. I think it's interesting with Meet Magic because you almost can completely cut out that entire model and not need that whole area. And I know that might sound controversial because it's a change of thought. But I mean, realistically, you can start having these really critical conversations with the people who can make those key decisions and not have to kind of filter through the other noise. And right now, there's so much noise in the market that you kind of, there needs to be a way to filter through that.
Yeah, that's a really valuable point because, when Ryan came on board, when I was first talking to Ryan, when I found out that Ryan had left Conga, I thought this is crazy. And Ryan and I started having a conversation on LinkedIn Messenger, and we were talking. And Ryan just popped out this idea about this mountain, and what Meet Magic does is it helicopters you to the top of the mountain. And I didn't even think about this in these terms, but it's so relevant. And what you're saying there is, if you think about the mountain, at the bottom of the mountain, you've got the individual contributors or the people that are working on the business, solving problems inside the business. Often those problems at that level are sort of smaller value problems and smaller value sort of budget sizes to deal with those problems. The higher you go up the mountain, the more you get past the decision maker level, the problems get bigger, the budgets get bigger to solve those problems. And so by very definition, if you're helicoptered to the top of that mountain to have a conversation, you're going to have a great conversation about something potentially that is a big problem that has a big budget to fix. And I can't help but think SDRs they're not having those conversations at that level. They're operating at the bottom of the mountain to try and get a foot in the door. Is that, Ryan, is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, they're trying to tee up meetings and get opportunities into Salesforce at the end of the day, and that's their KPI. So, I mean, if they're getting those meetings and they're very low tiered, that's a meeting for them, and that's part of their KPI. So, we can definitely see how this could work in conjunction with Meet Magic. So, say for example, we could have AGL, for example, when we start to look at a key target account, we could leverage our SDR or our, our sales team to be able to tap into that account itself, start to leverage information from, these lower tiers or these ICs, and start to build up this collateral for that Meet Magic conversation when you start to go higher and we have that top-down approach. So we know any business, right? The C-suite and the ICs, there's so much between them. They're not understanding what's happening in the day-to-day. So actually, when you bring them that problem and you've got that point of view around what they're actually doing and how they're operating, and you bring that to light around how you could solve that, that's where you're going to make a real difference between a business, right? And they're more inclined to be wanting to solve that. So that's a really, really interesting take around how I could see the two working together.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a valid point. I mean, Georgia, I mean, it's 2024. We need to do business development. How do we do business development in 2024?
I just think things need to change. The traditional models aren't working, and we know that. You look at the budgets, and then again, I go back to marketing, but the way that sales and marketing are working together and the actual leads that come through from events, there just needs to be a way where we kind of stop and rethink the traditional methods and then start to look at new avenues.
Yeah, you know, if we have this discussion as a team, it's kind of crazy because you wouldn't end up with a strategy where you have 22-year-olds with auto dialers calling CFOs and CISOs. You just wouldn't do that. And I often think that people need to iterate their go-to-market plans and start with a blank sheet of paper and start with first principles. Think about your customers and what they want.
Yeah.
And I think if you did, you'd end up with an entirely different go-to-market strategy than what's in place today. Right. I mean, we've come from obviously a place of abundance where there's a lot of money around, floating around to hire lots of people. Growth at all costs mentality, right? That was pretty much what it was. Do you think there's pressure coming down now to start scrutinizing those practices that have happened for so many years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I was saying before, the teams are just getting as lean as possible, and everyone's having to do more with less. Every conference I went to last year, that was the phrase that was being used across any business and any conference, doing more with less. So there's more pressure on the AEs now to really step into a role and be really quite robust. So they're not just being an AE, they're also being an SDR. They're also being part of a CS model to do renewals and keep their customers happy, but also, nurture those net new logos as well, which the business loves to bring new logos on board. So, their roles are starting to become more hunter focused. And this is a way that, Meet Magics can be that platform to be able to be that prospecting tool that they're generating their own pipe and be able to do their part of the prospecting motion. And I mean, SDRs are being cut as well. So, again, that's AEs now having to step up to the plate and do it themselves.
But are they going to do that? Are they lazy? Have salespeople become so reliant on marketing and SDRs delivering them a lead that they now don't know what to do or how to do it? Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. AE roles, you can come from any function really and really step into an AE role. I mean, you could come from customer success. Maybe you don't have a real hunting background, but you've fallen into an AE role. Maybe you've come from another business or industry and, you've got some experience in account management, and then you've come over. So you don't really have that hunting mentality. So yes and no. I mean, if you've come through that SDR motion and you've grinded for a year and you know what it takes to pick up the phone and do that, then yes, it's going to become second nature for you to get that list and you're going to pick up the phone and do it. But I think for the other half that haven't done that before, that heavily rely on someone to do that for them, I think that's, a bit of a shake up for them to actually have to do that.
Yeah. Georgia, what's it like? Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, no, I was actually just going to raise a point. Brian, I was curious in your experience, what's it like for team morale always having rejection as an SDR, from an SDR's perspective? Because I just feel like in Australia, because of how our culture is, it's much more, I just feel like you'd get told no much more often than in anywhere else as an SDR. So what's your experience with dealing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably the number one thing that you're taught to have a really tough skin and just roll with the punches. You took every day as what it is. My manager was really quite good in a sense of, going through calls, coaching, talking about objections, how to handle them, to just, I don't know, show up and be yourself. You're hired as you're hired as the person that they want you to be, and just show up and be that person. Look, it's full of rejection. It really is. But that's sales at the end of the day. All of us get rejection. So it's just, these are the people that really succeed. The SDRs, they really do, because they're thrown into the gauntlet and it's sink or swim. You get to your KPIs and you'll do that any means possible.
Yeah.
But can that be detrimental to the pipeline or, the opportunities that you create at the end of the day off the back of that? So that's something to think about.
I think that's a really valid point that Georgia raised. And by the way, for everyone watching, this is not even scripted. We have no notes. This is off the cuff completely. So if we're swearing, I'm swearing only. This is but what George has just mentioned about the feeling of winning is really it's really the distance or the difference between an SDR or a function of an SDR winning or losing. If you get the sense that you're constantly being beaten up because you're constantly getting a no, that feeling is not good. It's not good for team morale at all. But if you get a sense that you're winning, well, that's good for team morale, because that will just keep producing that sense of winning. And of course, teams that feel like they're winning often go on and win. And so when I think about the cost that we're spending as a business, let's say we've got 5 SDRs, 70 or 100 grand a year. Call that $400,000 a year, and let's just say 20% of the time they feel like they're winning because they get a result with someone that says yes. That's 80% of that $400,000 that's wasted, basically. When in actual fact, you could take that same amount of money and have 400 C-suite meetings with Meet Magic. That same $400,000 will turn into 400 connections, but just think about what happens when you have that connection. The feeling is you're winning because you're having a conversation with a decision maker. And that feeling of winning leads to more feeling of winning. The psychology of SDRs versus just having a meeting needs to be looked at as well. How do you think we should bring this to market? Because we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, but people have always done what they've always done, and they're going to continue to do what they've always done because they feel safe doing that, and you don't get fired if you're doing it and everybody else is doing it. Whereas if you do something new and innovative like us, we get the scrutiny, but not that.
Change is hard, but I think it's important what you just mentioned, Carl, because that transactional. At my organization, we have an offshore BDR team, and it's hard because they're sending constant requests, and whilst it's casting that net wide, there is what is the actual percentage of meetings that are booked from that wide reach out. And then just going back to that transactional kind of feeling when you are an executive, and we all have our inboxes completely flooded with automated messages now using AI, and it kind of just is a disconnect from having an actual connection with someone. And I think what Meet Magic does really well is bring this less transactional conversation to the table, where you can actually really have a valuable conversation and feel like you're getting to know someone and have their time, which is something that you don't really have in the sales process these days. Yeah. So I think that's where the value really is. And it's looking at a different model. It's just a completely different model and changing mindsets, which can be really difficult.
Yeah, it's going to take some change, and change is always hard at first. It's messy in the middle, but it's beautiful at the end. I know this. Most people don't realize I started my career as an SDR. So when I got to Australia, I was knocking on doors selling cable television. That's where I learned to deal with people fast, because you learn to take rejection pretty quick when that door slams in your face. Let me tell you. And then my first ever job. This is my first ever proper job, and I mean proper job, where I was on the books getting paid a salary. I was 27, 26, and it was with Macquarie Corporate, who's now our client. They call Macquarie Cloud, Macquarie Telecom. I was employee number 23 or something stupid like that. David and Aidan was obviously running the company, the boss, the CEO, and his brother. Even Danielle, David's sister, was working there. I think the grandma was on the books back then as well, so she was in the office a lot. And now, of course, there is this amazing company that are doing amazing things in the data center world and the cloud world and so on. In fact, they've been our client for about a year now, and we've got a case study with them. And they closed their biggest deal ever out of one of our meetings. I think they had like 30 meetings, and they closed this millions and millions of dollars worth of business, which is amazing. But I remember the days when Patrick Newland and I used to sit down and we would sit in the office, and our job was to get as many meetings as we can for the sales team. And David doesn't know this yet, but I used to put the odd fake one in there just to bump the numbers up a little bit. It's what you had to do just to make your number for the day. If you want 15 meetings for the day, you're only on 14 or 13. You might have to just put a couple in there that were dodgy. And I used to do that. Sorry, Patrick, David. So my apologies. But that's my background. That's where I started from. So I completely empathize with what it takes to get on the phone and make many calls over the period of the period of the day. I just wish that one day the amount of scrutiny that goes onto new initiatives like ours would go onto those old initiatives that are not producing the results, because I genuinely believe that you can spend the same amount of money that you're spending on an SDR and get way better results with new initiatives like what we're doing here.
And you'd have a much happier team, I feel like.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's kind of ludicrous that, if you're in sales, and we were talking about this before, Ryan, about most high-end salespeople get a 3 or 6 month guaranteed commission when they start a company as an incentive to keep your bum on your seat, or to keep your bum on the seat and not leave. Here's 6 month guaranteed commission. And I often think that rather than doing that, an HR team that's hiring salespeople should just give them 10 meetings through Meet Magic, because you can pretty much determine if that salesperson is going to be successful after 10 meetings. You can't determine if that salesperson is going to be successful if you've just shoved $150,000 in their pocket, because the psychology of that just doesn't make sense. It's like, I've got all this money now, I can take the foot off the gas. Doesn't make sense.
No, I totally agree with that, Kyle. You're setting them up for success, but you're also giving them the opportunity as a business as well to generate your yearly number with those 10 meetings, which therefore benefits the business as well as it does the rep. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. So let's talk about the SDR futures. Where do you think it should be, Ryan? I mean, you've obviously come from that space. Where do you if you were to go and set up a business now using an SDR model, what model would you set up?
That's a really good question, Carl. I think there's definitely room for someone that is doing an outbound motion. There really is, right? You need someone out there, knocking on doors, but I think it needs to be much more efficient in how they operate. When we look at the ROI and we look at the cost of what Meet Magic does, how Meet Magic costs, and you start to strip that back, or who's on the call when you bring in your technical resources, you bring in managers and directors and whatnot, and you start to have these high level conversations. When you start to look at how much time, money, and resources is spent on these calls and trying to map out these opportunities that you have, that $1,000 initially is actually quite cheap. So when you look at it from that perspective, you could have like a half model where you look to really spark your team with, I guess, Meet Magic meetings to have these top-down approach in their key target accounts, but also have that SDR kind of nurturing, going into those accounts, finding out information, how are they currently doing things today, so that you're going into these conversations that you're having with these C-suites very well prepared and have a strong point of view about what's happening within their business.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Georgia? What would you do?
I've always taken, even I think coming from the startup space, it's that top-down approach. You need to sometimes, when you're in the startup world, you're kind of, scrutinizing every cost. So you don't have the funds to waste to do anything different than what you believe will work. So you kind of go to the key decision makers as your, natural mindset to kind of get things done. And I feel like there's, using Meet Magic, as Ryan said, I just think there's also the opportunity to not waste time on deals that actually won't come to fruition, because maybe that person who you've been speaking to is a blocker, or maybe there actually is no opportunity there. So you get your answer faster. But yeah, I definitely think it's interesting now just seeing the way that people are actually adopting the Meet Magic platform. I've had a meeting as a Meet Magic vendor as well as an exec, and I see both sides and both benefits. And the way now, I mean, Salesforce is adopting the platform. So we're having some really exciting discussions with Salesforce, getting the execs to come into the tower and having these discovery sessions. And I think there's so much value where we can add and then include additional execs to even actually create a bigger impact, which is huge. I mean, the charities who can benefit from this as well, it's a much more valuable way to have a conversation and a discovery session.
You just sense an energy of the salespeople getting excited again.
So excited. Like, I can't even tell you.
But that one thing alone makes it exciting to go to work. It's like, you know, you're going to have a great conversation with some decision makers, and you haven't had to work that hard for it. This is the thing that really gets me, is that all you have to do is log on to the Meet Magic platform and send a request, and 9 times out of 10 you'll get a reply back from an exec with a calendar invite in your diary. It's like, why waste all of that effort and time and money doing all of that stuff when you can just go and have the meeting? And it just makes absolute logical sense. Georgia, I just want to say, and Ryan, I just want to say thank you for joining me on this little chinwag. What's really evident to me is that I need to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, and you two definitely are. You both speak way better than I do. You've got a completely different outlook on things, which is completely relevant for today than I do. And I just feel really, really proud to have you both in this team. It's just, I think there's so much that we can do together, and not just talking about selling Meet Magic, but the value in this conversation that we can share with other people, just to bring some awareness to this topic, because it's important. If you're a CEO of a business and you're spending all that money and it's not getting any results, why keep doing it? What are you doing? What planet are you living on where you're spending $500,000 a month on SEO and not being able to track those results and where those results come from? What planet? It doesn't make sense. This is people are firing people, sucking SDRs, like you're saying. That's because of a pressure on cost, because business has fallen off. We've all seen what's happened to SaaS companies. Licenses have dropped through the roof, revenues dropped through the floor, and so all of a sudden you've got layoffs happening. And if you're not scrutinizing the things that aren't producing a result today, well, you've got rocks in your head. Yeah. You literally have. If you're spending money, $50,000 a month on things that are not producing any ROI whatsoever, or have very little ROI, then why are you doing that still? It just doesn't make sense. And this is why I wanted to come and have this conversation, because I just know it. There's some people out there, even if just one CFO looks at this and goes, okay, today I'm going to scrutinize everything we've done for the past quarter, and I'm going to have a look at all the marketing stuff that we've done. And this is not saying anything bad about marketing. We're not doing that. But what we're saying is it's time to. Things have changed. Sales is changing. People are moving into digital channels a lot faster than we thought. Gartner are saying this, not me. This is what Gartner are saying. We're seeing execs logging onto the platform, sending meeting requests. It's happening fast. And if you're not playing here, just like if you're not playing with AI, you're going to miss out. So I just want to say thank you. And Georgia, should we spruik the event that's happening, because it's pretty exciting, huh?
It is very exciting. I cannot wait. We've got so many exciting people involved and already confirmed to attend, and yeah, it's just heating up.
And for those that don't know, top of Salesforce Tower, it's the most incredible location. On June the 11th, we are launching the world's first digital impact card. And what this basically means is every time an executive has a meeting, they'll get delivered a digital card. And we've got some really exciting sponsors that are coming on board with this as well, which we'll talk about soon, or we'll reveal soon. But basically, the executive is going to have the ability to distribute those funds to the charity that they care about, and have a little humble brag about it. So it's really giving the executive the power to distribute those funds after a meeting. So it's really fundamentally changing the feeling of what a meeting is. And the fact that we've got this algorithm that's bringing these meetings together means that the relevance of those meetings is much higher than what it used to be, which is another function which we didn't talk about, Ryan, which we can talk about next time, I guess. But often the execs they get an SDR on a call, and they just say yes for the sake of getting them off the call, and then they turn up to that meeting and it's not relevant, or it's not. So we're sort of changing the process of around meetings and how relevant they are to the executive, meaning their time is valued a lot more. So Anyway, enough's enough. Go and have your beer, drinks, whatever you're doing on a Friday night. I'm going to go and have some breakfast. And thanks again for joining us. And if anyone's got any questions, reach out to Roy, to Ryan, or to Georgia, and we'll see you all on the next one. Next one should be all around sales as well, Ryan, because I think there's so much going on in the sales world that I think that's also up for looking at and putting a microscope over why are salespeople why they're so reliant on marketing, or so reliant on SDRs, or so reliant on. It's almost like they've got this crutch and they've lost it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's cover that.
Easy. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye.
Carl.